What is up? Dylan here from Stacks. I'm here with my business partner, Alex, who also runs Stacks with me. Have a few questions for him. We actually just got back from a event with a group that, we spend, over five figures a year to be in as well as go to the events. So I figured to start, we would kind of just talk about some of our biggest takeaways that we got from being in Tampa for about 4 days with a lot of pretty successful business owners. So Alex, go right ahead. Just what are some of your biggest takeaways from Tampa this past weekend?
Uh, Biggest takeaways, I think I kept coming back to more self development. Um, Everything ends up stemming back to what's the best way you can show up as the best version of yourself consistently. Um, in terms of business tactics, I think for us, we are at a point where we're really scaling up the marketing side, and so tactically, there's never really been a better time for us to launch more paid acquisition. Um, and how that affects us is really, it forces you to really think about the cash flow considerations because, um, even if you are throwing everything on a card for your ad spend, you got to be able to track that. You got to be able to track the customer acquisition cost. So we're heavily looking at that. And I think getting more uh, understanding around how we can make that work and reverse engineering our goals. Like, say for instance, if we're trying to hit a revenue level KPI, what does that look like? How many clients do we need to bring on for that per month? What is the effect of that formula as it relates to our close rate? What about calls per month that we're taking? What about your ad spend, your customer acquisition cost, the break even point of how long it'll take for you to reach that revenue target? Um, Tactically, those were some really heavy insights that we got, and basically just broke it all down into math. And Daniel Fazio was great at his presentation. Got to meet Taylor Welch, got to meet Jeremy Newsome. I know Dylan, you and I spoke to Jeremy yesterday, um, and just connected with other business owners that are just killing it. So, heavily recommend the networking, um, investing in your own self education, investing in these meetups. You're just going to level up your energy and just your thought levels in terms of, like, going in, we might have been thinking at this level, and after the weekend, it basically skyrocketed our framing in terms of thinking we can actually reach this 10 levels above. So yeah, awesome event. Had a great time. Refreshed, ready to go. And yeah, overall had a great time.
Absolutely. Yeah. After, going to places like that and being around so many similar people trying to accomplish similar things, it definitely filled my cup up. I was excited to get back and get to work and get after it for sure. Yeah, some of the things I took away, the biggest one probably was just the idea that 99.9% of people don't take enough time to actually get clear and think and just be alone in their own thoughts. There's always, for most people, there's always some sort of external input, whether it's their phone, podcast, YouTube, TV, whatever it is, music. They're just never actually given time to themselves to actually think for more than 5 minutes at a time. So, for me, that's been, taking at least an hour out of the day to just pretty much go walk around with no phone in my pocket. My wife doesn't come with me. Like, it's just straight, just me frolicking about the land, basically, and seeing what comes to mind, um, which has been cool. And that kind of allows you to really get clear on why you're doing what you're doing and what's important to you. Um, so that was
Yeah,
probably the big one. Like you said, as far as self-development, it kind of all comes back to that.
think it was, I can't remember who said it. I think it was like Confucius or Genghis Khan or something. Aristotle, I don't know, one of the philosophers. Um, Said man's problems all stem from the fact that they can't sit in a room alone for an hour doing nothing.
Mhm.
So if you took time each day, each week to actually, and for me, I'm actually putting it on my calendar, literally do nothing else but think and just sit with your
Mhm.
thoughts. Um, it's powerful. There's not enough, everybody's just information overloaded. So take time to think,
Yeah, and most people
get aligned with your thoughts and
maybe
honor it.
yeah, most people maybe get 5 minutes a day, if that. And it's like, I mean, that's what Jeremy Newsom was saying. Most people just don't do that enough. They don't get enough
Yeah.
time alone. So,
Simply slow down.
yeah, we've been shooting for like at least an hour a day, and that's been cool. Tactically learned a lot of stuff on the sales side as far as like bumping your frame up and down, as well a lot on how to like hire a setter, ramp up a setter, the goal of, you know, the setter's goal once you have them in. Because we're probably looking at doing that here somewhat soon. So a lot of good stuff on the sales side, but overall, yeah, it was an awesome event. Just filled my cup up a ton, and it was the second time me and Alex got to hang out in person too, which was cool. We were on a remote firm and don't get to see each other in person too much, but
That'll change.
yeah, awesome time. Yeah, we're getting better at it. So
All
the
right,
other
let's
piece,
get into it.
like just super quickly wanted to touch on too was, obviously all of that this weekend was a business expense for us, tax deduction, tax write-off. Education expense is one of my favorite tax write-offs because you're essentially getting a write-off for learning how to make more money and increasing your earning capacity, which is a really, really cool thing. Alex might have cut out there for a minute, but it was more of a statement instead of a question instead. So I think you can hear me now. I'm gonna just move to the next question. So
Good. Cool.
As far as so the education expense of us getting into that, coaching group and going out to the mastermind was all a write-off. But then what about like the travel and the meals? When you're traveling or going out for a business meal, what exactly is deductible when doing those things?
Pretty simple. If you're taking a client out for a meal, like a travel meal, it's right off. You can write that off. If you are simply just buying a meal for your own self, I know that it used to be 100% of a deduction. Now it's 50. So same thing with Mastermind, self-education for the business. You can write those off.
Yeah, and then traveling, you obviously can also write off like the flight and the lodging as well for the travel. And then for the meals, when you have a business meal, just write the name of the person you went with and what you talked about on the receipt and take a picture. And that's plenty of documentation for that sort of thing. And then for travel, same type of thing. Just whip out a Google Doc, have a small itinerary of what you did each day, and who you were with, and the business activities that you were done, and that's absolutely enough as far as documenting.
I'll usually write it on the receipt. Like we took out, if you guys on Sunday, Sunday or Monday, I'll write the names on the receipt when I'm signing in, signing the bill, tipping, all that good stuff. Better do it right then and there than later.
Totally agree. And then there's a pretty cool, tax deduction strategy as far as travel goes. It's called Wrapping the Weekend, and it basically says that if you have business activity on Friday that's legitimate and business activity on Monday that's legitimate, then the Saturday and Sunday are counted as business days, even if you don't do any business. So basically, if you have real work on Friday, real work on Monday, the meals and lodging and travel expenses for Saturday and Sunday also become deductible, which is a pretty cool way to kind of wrap the weekend, get a deduction for maybe a weekend trip as long as you sprinkle some business in there. Anyway, onward. The next question I have is cash flow management. So this is a really difficult thing for most business owners, but in your opinion, what are some of the most important things a business can do to stay on top of their cash flow?
Give me just a second. I gotta get this dog that we're watching out of the room.
There you
go. There we go. All right. You mentioned cash flow.
Yes.
So you want to get a sense of what's expected to come in, right? So let's say it's the end of the month, you've got $20,000 in your bank account. Say you have team members that get paid out on the first. What's the total amount of money that you're going to have to pay out on the first? Obviously, you want to have a float to make sure that you can satisfy payroll, of course, but also you got to take into consideration how much are you paying yourselves as a business owner? How much are you wanting to leave into the business as an emergency fund to be able to cover, maybe 2-3 months worth of expenses? You got to take that into consideration. Timing differences. If you have on the first $20,000 coming in, okay, factor that into your calculation. You don't ever want to be running out of money, of course, but it becomes a little bit of a game where you want to make sure that you're not left with any surprises. Same thing with taxes, right? Like if you are pushing 10% of your monthly profit into a separate bank account just so that you have it earmarked for taxes at the end of the year, that's a good tactic to deploy so that you're not left with any surprises. Or if you're paying into your quarterly estimated tax payments, that's also a great tactic because you can make sure you're not left with a surprise in a $20,000 tax bill at the end of the year. So there's many tools that you can use for this. I mean, I do think it's important to at least get a data points as to what your starting weekly balances are in your bank, ending weekly balances are, and you're tracking that because it just the more information and the more clarity you have over your cash flow, the better. And I think there's also probably more of a more in-depth discussion on say you're trying to purchase a large ticket item, okay? Then it becomes, do I want to pay this out in cash? What's the effect on that purchase for my other expenses that I do have to pay out? What is the effect on how our business is going to do this next month and the ultimate credit card statement that I'm going to have to pay out at the end of the month? How's that going to affect my cash flow? If I want to purchase this big ticket item, maybe I can get a 0% card or draw down on my line of credit if I need to. A lot of businesses run out of business because of cash flow. The large majority of them do that. So that's really important. You really gotta pay close attention to your cash flow and your bank balances and audit. And right, so all those comparative numbers that you do when you look at your financials from this month to prior month, take advantage of looking at those variances of your expenses. If you see something's out of whack and 40% increase in this category of your expense, maybe your marketing budget over the prior month, okay, well, let's take that difference and make sure that it's earmarked so that we're paying that off at the end of the month and not left with any surprises. So a lot of different tactics, a lot of different strategies, but ultimately it all comes down to clarity and organization and allows you to stay on offense.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, over 80% of businesses that go out of business, it's because of cash flow, not necessarily profitability, right? So the cash flow management is a huge piece. And like you mentioned, I think the most fundamental piece of advice is look at it and pay attention to it, right? Like a lot of people, a lot of business owners, especially, just like completely run away from that part of the business and they just don't look at it and just hope that it's working out. And that's just not a recipe for success. So
A
the
lot of business
fundamental,
owners treat their business as a personal ATM, and that's
this is
just
true.
not the way to go about it. You
Yeah.
can't do that.
So the first piece is to just actually be looking at it. As far as some other fundamentals, Alex hit on a couple of great ones. A few of the others that I would add is like the basics of it is how can you collect cash faster and how can you pay vendors later, essentially, is really the biggest thing. Can we collect money quicker and faster and more of it than we have to pay out, over the course of a month, a quarter, a year, 10 years, essentially. So, and then my follow up kind of last question to that is a lot of people will just check their business bank account once a week or maybe once in the morning and just look at, hey, what's in the business bank account? Okay, is that number high? Okay, great. Business is going great. The number's low. Business is bad. Why is, looking at the business bank account not good enough in terms of cash flow management?
Because it's a point in time reference, but it doesn't take the context of a larger picture. So if you have $5,000 in the bank, okay, well, what if yesterday I just paid $50,000 of payroll? That doesn't make sense. If I look at the bank and I see $5,000, of course, you can't take the opinion of my business is bad because that's just a point in time reference because you just paid out $50,000 to make payroll. So it's a simple concept of, just illustrating the higher level effects of there's just going to be cash moving up and down, in and out of your um, bank account. And it's just important to realistically put all the puzzle pieces together of all that activity, starting cash point, activity, ending cash point, right? And then the carryover, making sure you're referencing the comparative performance. If you look at your cash flow statement and see, okay, we added $10,000 of free cash flow after all things are said and done, great. If the next month you lost $6,000 in free cash flow at the end of the month, right? So after all that activity, you ended up with $6,000 less of free cash flow that you can deploy. That's something you want to look into. And that's why
Absolutely.
again, it just goes back to like, if you have your numbers in place, if you're taking care of your accounting, if you're taking care of your finances, that gives you the ability and the foundation to audit the activity and make decisions based off of that. And that's why realistically, if you don't have your finances in check, you're flying blind and you can't make proper decisions. It's just a matter of fact.
Absolutely. I think it confuses a lot of business owners, especially maybe early on business owners, but just business owners in general. I think it really confuses them when they'll look on their income statement and be like, okay, there was $30,000 of net profit. And then they're like, well, shit, my bank account didn't go up $30,000. And, you know, those income statements,
So true.
that net profit amount, it doesn't include you paying yourself. It doesn't include you paying off credit cards. It doesn't include you paying off loans or lines of credit. There's a lot of things that happen after the income statement, after net income. So yeah, you could have $30,000, but by the time you pay out, you and your partner pay off your 2 credit cards and pay off your loan, there might only be $1,000 or $2,000 or maybe even negative, and that's why the cash flow considerations become so important.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Like you and I, right? Each month we we uh we make distributions that are discretionary. Discretionary means depending on what happens, we will take a different amount. So there's often times where, and this kind of goes into our larger goals for Stacks, we're quite actively hiring more and paying top talent more. And for a little while, we were paying top talent more than we were paying ourselves. Um, that was all purposeful. So every month, Dylan and I, for reference, we'll get together. We'll decide how much does it reasonably make sense to distribute to both him and myself. Um, we're doing that purposefully because we need to make sure that, okay, if we pay each other 12 grand, great. Okay. How is that going to affect our ability to pay off the next month's statements? How is that going to look in the context of how much we're going to receive in terms of our MRR growth? Okay. If we can expect, if we grew an extra 15, 20% month over month from last month, all right, that's an extra $20,000 or 20% more additional revenue that's going to come in and that's going to be expected. Then you can branch out even further on collectability. Okay, we grew at 20%. Our top line's now 250,000 a month, right? Just for an example. How much of that 250,000 is collectible? Okay, if we have 70, if we can expect to receive 70% of that 250,000 each month, great. That's the number I want to work with. I want to be conservative and not just expect we're going to get $250,000 right off the bat. From there, then it comes into play with our existing balances, right? Credit card balances. What about our growth objectives with our ad spend? Okay, we're going to earmark $40,000 this month for ad spend. Let's make sure that there's cash in the bank at the end of the month for that. Okay. Then you've got your payroll and your capital, your human capital. How much is that going to be per month? All right, let's earmark that. And you start winding down these balances and you're left with a net projected number. Okay, from that point, we want to make sure that after we pay ourselves the prior month, we're not going to dip below that amount because that's like our minimum cash requirements that we want to conservatively plan for. So it's really, really important. You will end up in trouble, and what happens is when you end up in trouble, you start making decisions based on emotion, and that's where a lot of people, including myself in the past, have gotten in trouble with getting yourself into too much debt. And so it's really, really, really important, especially the young guys that are out there growing and scaling and just kind of making impulsive decisions with their money. So um, it'll change your life for the better or for the worse. But one thing is for sure, you just have to manage your cash.
Absolutely. Well, all great points. This was a good little episode. Obviously brought to you by Stacks. If you need help with your accounting and finances, hit us up. We'll get you taken care of, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.
We will. All right.